Welcome back. It's Mark Monfort here for another episode of Redbelly Insights, and we've got a special guest in this one with Corey. Corey, thanks for joining us.
No worries, Mark, and a pleasure to meet you for the first time.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like I've heard your name around the traps. There's a whole heap of us in the Web3 space here in Australia. We're going to learn more about what you're doing in Blubird. But just to give a quick recap to folks that might have missed it, Redbelly's been doing these insights podcasts, meeting different folks that we're working with, different projects, meeting the team. You had Arturo and Tim in the first episode. I got to chat with Vincent in the latest one, and there was a really interesting topic on fairness. We talked about fairness of access, transaction ordering, accountability, and just around infrastructure and all of the importance of what blockchain tech brings. We're going to dive into your project and the importance of the need to bring interesting projects on board, and all about Blubird. And I know that in the community, there's a lot of people that have been chatting about it and stuff, but we actually get to hear it directly from the founder's mouth here. But yeah, can you tell us a bit more before we begin, just how you got into the Web3 space? What's your background?
Yeah, definitely. So it started early 2017, probably like quite a lot of folk, some are obviously a lot earlier, but yeah, 2017 for myself. And it was just maybe an average story. One of my friends, a trusted friend, said that he had made about 50 grand from a thing called an ICO. To which I thought, well, what's that? I trusted this guy, so I was curious. And yeah, basically just fell into the world of Web3 from that point onwards, and never turned back from there. I started up a marketing company in the space. I'm also the co-founder to a venture capital firm called Andromeda Capital, and now Blubird. So I can't seem to stay away from the sector, I think.
No, it's good. It's definitely one of those. I mean, when we started, I think 3.5 years ago, ourselves getting involved in projects, starting up things like the Australian DeFi Association, and just getting involved in community, like it really pulls you in no matter what. Like even if it's just out of curiosity, or to develop, or to just be part of these projects. So speaking of projects and companies, you've grown and created Blubird. Now, it might be rare, but there are probably people that haven't heard about it. For anyone hearing about it for, say, the first time, what's it all about? What is it that you guys are trying to solve over there?
Yeah, no worries. So I guess, well, for those who have been following us for a little while, you probably know that we've got a couple of different products, but I'll, I guess, explain it for those who are new as well. So there's two main sectors that we operate in. First one that everyone likely knows about is the real world asset side. That's everything to do with tokenization, taking off-chain assets on-chain, things like that. The second side is our Web3 founders tools. So that's everything to do with tokenomics, cap tables, deploying of smart contracts for a token, vesting contracts, or an airdrop. And then also on the investor side, we've got our investor portal and our universal claims portal as well. So basically, and that's what today's really what we're talking about for the most part in today's chat, right? Is our launch of the Web3 tools. But I suppose we should also touch a bit on the really cool stuff on the RWA side as well, right? So that'll be also very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of tools, like it's very important that we have these sorts of things out there, because if you don't have the tools, you're starting from scratch each time. We've got the building blocks here. Open source is such a great place to gather the different things that are needed. Like if everyone just built in a closed manner, didn't create tools for others to use, it'd just be a very difficult place for us to be in. But let's talk about this, because what you've got here, when we look at it, it's a really comprehensive platform. and you've taken things like token setup all the way through to the investor tools. And I saw you on a recent podcast. Was it the Crypto Dads or something like that? The one that we were talking about? What's the name of it?
Dad's Gone Crypto, I
Dad's
believe
Gone
it was.
Crypto.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a really great episode. I was watching that before this, a little
Mhm.
bit of it, and I recommend that folks also check that out. But like you discuss some of this there, so let's dive into it more. But how would you explain, let's call it the full journey that someone can take with Blubird?
Yeah, definitely. So there's two perspectives that we'll cover, I suppose, on that one. So the first one being from the founder's side. So they would generally start by setting up their company first and foremost on the platform. From there, they would either import an existing set of tokenomics into that module, or they would build it from the foundation up through the guided wizards and such in the software itself. Once it's in that app, they're ready to either deploy a token if they wanted to at that stage. They can just launch a token with no vesting contracts, no nothing else. Could be just like a meme coin or something like that that has no other purpose but just to exist. Alternatively, they could then start working on their cap table from that point. So they would publish their tokenomic set, and they would start to, by publishing, what I mean there as well is that solidifies the economic set that they would be basing the rest of everything else on. They would then switch over to the cap table software. They would import what we call buckets, which might be classed as a seed round, a private round, partnerships, things like that, which are defined by each bucket has a total supply. It has its own vesting schedule, things like that, and sometimes even a price. Once they import that, the system takes all of the info from their tokenomics that they had just set up into that now cap table. Now they're ready to start allocating people against that, or companies for that matter. From that stage, they can start taking advantage of some of our tools, whether it be tools that automate the KYC, some things that really just help in fundraising. We've got some automated onboarding type magic links, we'll call them, where they can just share a link with an investor or a prospective purchaser. They click on the link and simply type in how much they would like to request from said project. Really seamless. There's no barriers then at that point. There's no back and forth of, oh, well, I thought you said, you wanted this much, but I entered that much. Like, it just, they can put in how much they request. It's up to the founder to either approve said amount or decline it and put in the actual amount that they're allowed to invest or contribute. Once they round up their cap table, they're then ready to deploy vesting contracts. So they move over to our deployment engine side of the platform, and they can do what's basically a one-click import of which buckets they want to then deploy contracts for. And if it's one or more buckets, that's fine. They just click it from a list, and then they go through and it automatically imports anybody who is available to be deployed to. So there's a few checks. Is the KYC done? Is there a receiving wallet? Has their SAF been, signed, and is it funded? Once those checks are all approved on the platform, they're then approved for deployment. And really, it's a couple of clicks from there. They sign a few transactions, and their token is underway. So that's the founder's side. Sounds very simple, and it is. So from the investor's side, it's a little bit different. So they can start their journey from two different points, or 3 points technically, but we'll say two for now. First one being, like I said, one of those magic links. A founder of a project shares a link. They click on it, register, fill out their profile, request an allocation. Very straightforward. Each allocation, by the way, comes with a strategic ad attached to it. So that investor can say, hey, here's the value I bring to your project. This validates my request for X amount as to why that should be taken seriously. So that's one way. Second way is essentially if a founder has already been chatting with a person and they're like, cool, I'm interested. Here's my name. Here's my email address. Here's how much I want. The founder then just keys those 3-4 bits of information in the portal. It fires off on the cap table, it fires off an invite email. The investor clicks on it, registers, accepts the allocation, and they're away. That's as easy as that. Then all they've got to do is their KYC, if it's required for that project, allocate their receiving wallet. If they're funding it, they can put in their TXID for any contributions, things like that. And it's all in one place. So that's the path for one project. If they're on multiple projects, again, the path doesn't change, but then in the tab on the investor portal, they can see a My Investments area. So then they can view the specifics for every project that they're a part of, what stage it's at. If they've got something that needs doing, there'll be, notifications, things like that. And it really just keeps everything in one place. So
yeah, wow.
Pretty useful, hopefully.
No.
Well, it already is, so it's not really a hopeful.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Like you always like have that kind of like it's more of an optimism thing rather than, oh geez, I hope it works, folks. So don't misconstrue it. There's like AI chatbots that'll be like screening the transcript and like you got to have the positive sentiment here. So if you bots are listening, but in any case, what it sounds like is really great, because we live in a world nowadays where, thanks to like AI tools, thanks to just clever kind of workflows, regardless of whether you're using AI to help you build or not, but more of these all-in-one kind of platforms that you just have that much more smoother kind of process. And, if you think about some of the great apps out there, they didn't always start, necessarily building for a certain thing. They maybe, take, for example, the guys that came up with Slack. They started out trying to make a game to begin with, and then they just said, oh, hang on a second, it's really hard to communicate. Why don't we create this app that'll help us internally communicate? Oh, it's pretty good. Why don't we release the app? Next thing you know, scrap the game. Let's go with Slack, because like that is the real tool out there. Whether you love it or hate it, it came out to much fanfare. But solving problems, coming from that VC space, I think is really interesting, and seeing what it's been like for investors and people that are trying to raise capital. There's a whole heap of like really interesting stuff that's out there. Now, you say that you're here to make Web3 easier. When we talk to you, that there's a lot of stuff that's out there that's technical. So for the non-technical teams, you've mentioned some of these things that help make the process smoother. Is there anything else you want to add to that? You've described a bit about the platform, and just before you answer that, are there videos on your YouTube, or are there these like interactive kind of walkthroughs so people can see just how easy it is? Because the way you describe it sounds pretty compelling.
Yeah, definitely. So there's currently no videos just of yet, being this week being launch week for this, public launch, I should say. So no such media yet exists. However, we will be creating, a couple of, like you say, some nice walkthroughs, demos, things like that. But we also welcome people to reach out if they're interested to do that as well. But we'll touch on that in a bit. So to answer your question, I might just rewind a little bit and quickly maybe touch on some of the key problems that we're also solving, as well as how we're streamlining some things. So it all kind of goes hand in hand here. So as you may have gathered from my description on how it all works, we're automating a lot of things. There's a lot of automation, there's a lot of streamlining. So that in its essence creates a lack of double handling of data points, which increases accuracy. So instead of having multiple failure points, you've really got your only one failure point, and it's when you first enter that piece of foundational data. From that point onwards, that is, it can't get stuffed up, essentially. It's all immutable, well, not immutable, but our database doesn't randomly change your stuff, whereas human error can be injected if you're running off spreadsheets, for example. And there's a few other items here, like time saving, the man hours it takes, to get tokens or smart contracts audited, the cost involved. There's a lot of cost involved right there. We've estimated that it saves a minimum of 50,000 US dollars per launch. And it saves an estimated 30 to 60 days based on like data handling, audit times, things like that, just certain lead times that really take a lot of time, as well as investor handling, which can take a bit of time. So hopefully that answers some of that. But then to go into why it makes it easier, so each side of the application has its own guided wizard. Each guided wizard has a comprehensive set of help tools. So the help tools are not designed to teach them how to use the actual application. The app is easy enough. We don't need to handhold them through that process. So the help tools are really aimed at educating the founder on the decisions that they're making. For example, not many founders might know that when you go to choose a token ticker, Twitter, or now X, only can recognize a cache tag of up to 6 characters. That's a random bit of information that not many people know. And most times people find out when it's too late and they can't tag themselves. So we aim to educate founders through these, these processes and the choices that they're making, that generally those choices cannot be undone. So we're making sure they're equipped on that side. And then, like I mentioned as well, the data automation flows. So your tokenomic foundation, as soon as that foundation is set up and saved and published in our system, that flows through all the other modules. The investor portal pulls from that, so they can see tokenomics in there as well as a participant. They can see what they're getting into. It's all there across it. So that means if they update the tokenomics on that module, it's updated everywhere. So as an investor, you can be confident that what's being displayed in the application is what's being deployed. It can't be fudged. You can't be shown one thing and another gets deployed. That's a lie. If they were to do that, they would have to change it seconds prior to launch, and then they could. But I mean, bad people are going to do bad things, right? So there's no real way to handcuff them into doing the right thing always, but we make it as transparent as possible. So all of the data calculations, they're reconciled on our backend framework. So unlike spreadsheets, where again, they're only as good as the person who built the spreadsheet, our calculations are made to be exact to whatever decimal points that are needing to be worked to. Our system will handle it. There's no rounding. There's no, we calculate for, especially in deployment of contracts, rounding errors can be a huge issue in how tokens get allocated, and it can break a system, because if you've got a bucket of 10 tokens and a rounding error pushes it to 11 tokens, there's going to be a problem. So our system makes sure that just can't happen, which it's more, I wouldn't say it's common, but it's certainly a big issue. And then lastly, we've got all of our pre-audited smart contracts and the no-code deployment engine. So probably the easiest part of everything, right, is deploying a smart contract on our system. As a founder, you don't need to know how to code. The contracts are pre-audited, so they can be trusted that they are up to most current standards. They are regularly audited. So it's not like, if there's a bug, we won't know about it for a year plus. We'll know about it. We'll start, we'll run through the update sequence for those. And for certain contracts, we'll be offering those to be upgradable to that extent through pre-approved patches. So there's going to be a few safety, I suppose, safety gauges, safety things in there for people to really fall back on as well. And it really just removes it, so there's zero roadblocks to launching in Web3. It's not much more I can say that. I don't think it's very straightforward.
I think it's compelling enough that people just got to go out and try it for sure. And you mentioned spreadsheets there, and this is the thing. Like a lot of people don't realize just how much of traditional. When I say traditional, it sounds like it's old and stuff. It's current, folks. Like most of the world is still not on blockchain, and it's very. This is why we're in this space. Corey, the stuff that we're doing, Redbelly. There's a whole lot of the world that runs on these things that can be falsified, that can be misplaced. Your spreadsheet might not be the same as mine. You're not working from the same template. You're not working from the right template. And all of these cacophony, there's a word for you, of issues that just come from the real world. And it's so compelling when you see what it is that blockchain can do. And the reason why we're seeing a lot of traditional finance organizations, companies, governments, looking at blockchain for how it could potentially solve things. So I think it's really cutting edge stuff that you're doing here. Now we know that real world assets are a big focus of attention for you guys, and obviously for Redbelly as well. And there's so many fans of that particular type of umbrella when it comes to the community. And we will get to some community questions a little bit later on, folks. So just as a bit of a preview there, but it sounds like it's a big focus. We talk about things like carbon credits, gold, oil. What kind of industries would you say that you're building your platform for?
Yeah, definitely. So, well, first and foremost, real world asset tokenization is absolutely a core component of our business. I know I've just been talking about a lot of the regular projects and founders, launching tokens, things like that. But it is very important to note that RWA asset tokenization, things like that, is a huge part of what we do. And it's also been a natural evolution for us being in the tokenization infrastructure sector, itself. So as for the industries, look, our software is truly asset agnostic, meaning that, without too much issue and hassle, our platform can quite readily tokenize any asset class. Obviously, I have my personal preference on what ones I prefer to tokenize, just because of the simplicity of some of them. But some of them are quite frankly a nightmare. But mainly from a regulatory perspective, they're not fun to deal with. But currently we're working within a couple of industry sectors, such as oil and gas, mining, ESG, which is along the carbon credit issuance side of things. So just on that note, we've currently tokenized, an allotment of carbon credits already through one of our partners, Carbon Hood, to the tune, I believe, and please don't hold me to this exact number, but it's roughly $20-ish billion worth on that side. And then on the oil and gas side, so we've tokenized 2 coal mines, and I think it's around 20-ish capped oil wells. And that's to the tune of around $35 billion worth right there. So these are huge numbers, obviously, right? This is astronomical numbers that you often might see. You might see some news articles saying, oh, the tokenization real world asset sector is poised to hit $19 billion, right? And it's like, we're looking at that thinking, guys, we've already done that. Like we've hit that and we've moved on. So what we're actually aiming to do next is we're looking to set that up on rwa.io and display those assets on that dashboard. So that's something that we're working towards in the next, let's just say week or two, to have that, realized and shown on there, those assets, because as of that point, you can see the assets on chain, but unless you're a super sleuth, it's not going to mean a lot to you when you're looking at, smart contracts. You've got to really dig deep and figure out what you're looking at. So we're aiming at making it very easy for everyone just to see what assets are on, and tokenized on platform. And it's only going to keep growing from that point onwards. This is only 2 of our partners that I'm talking about. I mean, there's a whole world out there. So this is insane.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I work in the AI space as well, and there's definitely a lot of crossover. There's a lot of It's actually quite fortunate, I think, that generative AI folks. So I come from a data science and AI background, machine learning and stuff like that. But like the new AI, they talk about things and they say phrases like "this is the worst it will ever be." And it's kind of the same for blockchain, because the things that are happening now, the technology, yeah, it's been around. There's been a lot of things that have been created, experimented with in much faster ways than you would have in normal traditional spreadsheet finance, if we can coin a new term. But yeah, it's really interesting just how much you can fast track and experiment and showcase the value of blockchain and verification, and don't have to trust folks. You can actually see things on chain and stuff. And I think choosing the right platform is a very important kind of feature with all this kind of stuff. Even if we have moved beyond, what the claims were, or you're not fast enough, or you're not doing as much as like the values aren't as high, and as you're showing, like all of those things, the naysayers, the things that people have looked at in the past, it's very different now. But let's get to the crux of this show. You guys have chosen Redbelly to do this on. Why Redbelly? What made it, let's call it, the right network to build and to launch on? Can you tell us a bit more about the thinking there?
Yeah, definitely. And look, I'm by no means a blockchain expert on all things, Redbelly and other networks. However, the key components, obviously, as to why we did choose, and it wasn't actually just us who chose, it was unanimous between us and the partners. So there's, extra validation on that side. We didn't just force them to choose Redbelly. It was chosen unanimously across the board. And, the speed of transactions, yes, that was a huge thing, right? Because people, they, even on banking apps these days, although the transaction might not happen straight away, it will at least show, oh, it's pending, or, it's they'll fulfill it even though their back end is still processing it. They've just fronted you the cash to use instantly. So a lot of people don't understand that.
It's an illusion, and I think
Yep.
blockchain and being in this space, it helps you break that down. Sorry, please continue.
No, you're absolutely right there. So that was one factor, speed, because especially when it's doing cross-border transactions, speed is paramount, because it adds to that trust layer. So speaking of trust layer, you've got the built-in compliance and the KYC, permissioned side of the network. What that allows is really a lot of trading to happen when there's not necessarily robust infrastructure. What I mean by that is you don't need to rely on, let's just say there's a trading platform or something like that, and you don't necessarily have to KYC your users, because in order to trade on Redbelly, they have to be KYC'd. They're already supposedly allowed to do what they're doing on that network, right? So, and I know there's some other legal nuances to factor into that on what type of asset it is and things like that, but all that aside, it really opens the door to, is this person real? Are they, a restricted person or not? First and foremost, like it could be a political person's of interest. It could be someone from a country that's, whatever the reason. There's a lot of different reasons why KYCs get knocked back, and why there might be certain restrictions imposed. So being able to do that at the wallet level and per se at the asset ownership level is huge. And it lightens the load and speeds up compliance essentially on that side. In terms of like the long-term side of things as well, it allows for a lot of unique type of assets to be created, because having that KYC built into it, all of a sudden, let's just say, for example, you wanted to create a DAO, and your DAO members, you don't necessarily want to KYC them. You just want to know that they're a legit person. Well, on the Redbelly network, that can be done, because to have a vote and have the token to perform that vote, well, you've got to complete that KYC. You can't use a botting farm. You can't, do anything of such of that nature. And therefore, the votes are a lot fairer. And they're weighted how they always should have been. But as you might have known with a lot of DAOs, there's always someone who has the tipping vote, and they always have the tipping vote, and it will always be that way. So this allows maybe something like that to operate in a true decentralized manner, again, without having to even worry about someone's KYC. And there's a plethora of other examples as well that really allow for, some really fantastic use cases, I think, with different types of, tokenization and such. So that's in the nutshell, that's why we chose. It's just, it ticks a lot of boxes. There's other chains that do tick also a lot of boxes, but quite frankly, this one ticks more. So
that's a great endorsement right there. And I mean, we're obviously on the Redbelly show, but even just taking a big step back, that they are all the things that you do need if you're going to do stuff in the real world. Like it sounds, and we see this with many other places where it's okay, so we've got problems in the current kind of centralized kind of world, but going completely decentralized where you have no idea who anyone is, that has its use cases. I'm not denying that. There is certainly stuff out there. It's like the whole Spotify versus the Pirate Bay. The Pirate Bay was out there, then Spotify came along to bring more balance to the force, so to speak. But there's still the Pirate Bay being used, and I can still see completely decentralized things out there. But I feel like for the majority of use cases, just like you see with Spotify, we're going to see a lot more people looking more towards this balanced force of you get the benefits of programmability and blockchain and verification and trust and all that. And, the compliance, the KYC, that ability to know that you can really, really trust the other operators in this network sounds pretty compelling as to why you chose Redbelly there. Now, we go back to, and we've spoken about some of the tools there, but one thing that we didn't touch on, so, you've got the investor portal, you've got the claims portal, you've got these things that it makes life really easy, and looking really forward to videos and walkthroughs that you've got there, because sounds pretty compelling. But what's the feedback? What are you getting so far? You've told us about it, but what are others saying?
Yeah, definitely. Well, look, it's still pretty early days, as the official launch is this week for the entire suite. We've done the soft launch of the investor portal and such prior to that, but as a whole, the all 5 products, this week is kind of it. So it's a little bit early for that direct sort of feedback. However, in the lead up to everything going live this week, because we've been building this for a long time, so as you can imagine, I've been one of those ultra excited founders who, whenever I get the chance to speak about it, I do. And also because I run a venture capital, I speak to a lot of projects. So I, obviously I chat to them about what we're building and gauge their interest and their requirements and their pain points, and make sure, and always check against what they're saying is what we're building to solution for. And to be honest, it's always an overwhelming, can I use it yet? When's it ready? And let me know when it's ready, because I needed this yesterday kind of situation. So although we don't have any direct feedback, I think the overwhelming demand for this, this is, it's just unreal, to be honest. And from the investors side, we've done some I'll say questionnaires, I suppose, or had some conversation with some of our early users. And the feedback is that it's a very clean, easy to use platform. It's very inviting to the user, and they're looking forward to really kicking it off when there's more projects inside of it. So it's been positive all round.
Yeah, nothing better than getting those first users out there. And obviously you do a lot of internal testing, even though, you can do as much testing as you want, but it's not until you really hit the market that you get that real proper, okay, I broke this, I tried this, this thing doesn't work, but it actually does, but it's just in how it's being translated. So all the fun stuff that you're going to go through on that journey, we're looking forward to as well, because that's where, how quickly you evolve stuff. And I think it's really important to understand that you're supporting not just like Web3 native teams, but it's also traditional businesses too. How do you kind of see those audiences? Because some may think of it as like quite different. Some may think that, hey, this is just technology, and at the end of the day, it's all the same kind of thing. Do you see both sides coming together? What are your thoughts on the audiences?
Yeah, definitely. So look, there's a few thoughts. Here's what I'll say though. So Web 2, they crave a seamless experience that hides all of the blockchain elements. We're not going to see full institutional adoption until that starts to take place. And that's what we've aimed to do on our real-world asset tokenization suite, on the OTC marketplace that exists within that suite. All of that really wraps up and hides, 80 to 90% of the blockchain elements. Aside from a few wallet signatures that they have to perform to authorize, smart contract creations, it all looks and feels Web 2. And then on the Web 3 side, Web 3 craves trust through transparency. That is, in its essence, blockchain. Aside from your, not your keys, not your assets, things like that. I mean, that's obviously the other side, but the trust through transparency, that on-chain ledger that anyone can audit at any stage and do the forensics on that, is the major, one of the major selling points on that. So we believe that this is the first meeting point of the two, is combining those two elements, right? Is having that the trust through transparency that's on chain, but hiding the experience that gets it to the on-chain point. So it feels like they're in their usual banking app from the 90s, but you look under the hood and it's like a supercharged V8, right? So it's beefy. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. There's other areas where it can likely come together as well, but I think that for us at least is the main starting point. We are dealing with a lot. For example, funny story, I spent 2 hours on a phone call with a guy that heads up the investment between JP Morgan and the Vatican Bank. He was an older gentleman. I don't know his exact age, but I'm going to say it was late 60s to early 70s, right? I had to teach him how to use MetaMask. Can you imagine, right? So it was 2 hours is what it was. So Web 2, while they're eager and they want to get on board with this, current technology stacks out there, they're not made for them. We got there in the end, don't get me wrong. We got there. It was a fun experience all round. But and he was very patient too, which was good. That's the issue that we're facing with Web 2 and big industry, I think.
I was going to say, I won't swear, the Vatican Bank. That is pretty interesting, especially, given, we've got a new Pope and all these, the world's 1.7 billion or whatever it was of Catholics and others. You don't have to be Catholic just to watch the fanfare that goes around selecting a new Pope. And for folks that don't know, the Vatican Bank is pretty huge. So really interesting to see there. But I think that the lesson from, that it's that generational kind of shift that's happening, what people were used to, the methods, the tools that, get put into market. And then we get used to that for a few generations. And now we have another kind of shift. What's going to be really interesting, Corey, is like when we are older, not giving away our ages or anything like that, but like when we'll be the ones that go, I don't quite understand. How did we put I didn't insert the brain chip in the right way. Is that
Yeah.
right? Like, you know, we'll be
Yeah.
getting, it'll be the future MetaMask version
Mm-hmm.
75 or whatever it is. But really great to see that there's patience out there to get
Yeah.
through this kind of stuff, because I think they see the benefits, right? Is that what it was?
Yeah, definitely that. And there's so much interest, I think, in big industry on these new assets, because they open up a lot of doors. For example, with a lot of the assets that we were working with on that one, that the story that I just told you about, these assets were previously uninsurable because they were not able to be made or verifiable, basically, for lack of a better term. You could not verify said asset was said asset. Therefore, insurance companies couldn't touch it. It was too much risk. They wouldn't underwrite it. So because we were able to tokenize said asset, so one is one, basically, that then opened the door for that asset class to be insured, which then all of a sudden that asset is more valuable. Now it's open to global markets, because what was once only a local asset that would only be serviceable to maybe a national purchaser is now an international asset, in that respect. So, and that's what they were very interested in that side of things, and exploring, their investors were wanting to explore that side as well, and really, take a glimpse into that side of things. So they're very progressive when it comes to that, but it's not showing yet. So I think with what we're seeing, what did we see the other day? Coinbase is now in the S&P 500. We've got is it Galaxy? I think is listing on Nasdaq or something or other on the 16th. I think it is. So there's huge things happening, which are big signs to the industry. To the Web3 space is ready. It's ready for TradFi, and it's still rough around the edges. And I think, to be honest, it kind of excites them a little bit. I know everyone thinks that they're a stick in the mud and they're behind the times. That's one sector, right? There is that, but there's the other sector who sees it for what it is, and they're getting excited. These are big signs to them that it's ready to move forward. So I think that's what we're going to start to see.
Yeah, we saw consensus overnight. I think CoinDesk TV had that, and you had a lot of TradFi folks on there. Traditional TradFi like BlackRock and others. The SEC's been speaking about it. A whole tokenization kind of forum, the roundtable that's been going on. But going back to some of the things that you mentioned there around it being under the hood. So, for example, we saw folks like Starbucks have their loyalty program built on blockchain, but they didn't say blockchain, and it's under the hood. You just use your loyalty program. It'll be supply chain stuff. It'll be payments. We know that these things like blockchain will be this powerful kind of technology underneath it. And something else that you mentioned, that just making things like easier, that with what we're doing now, I think as these things get created, like you mentioned the uninsurable part, it's like when cars first came out. It reminds me of, not that I'm that old, but I'm a history buff. And you saw that people complain, oh, the cars aren't great. Look, they over the cobbled stone, roads and stuff. Oh, look, they break down and stuff. Guess what happened when they paved it? When they created these things that actually accommodated the new technology that was better, we got trucks, we got motorcycles, we got buses, we got these new modes of transport that weren't thought about before, and new types of things, just like insurance for these and ways to invest. So it's really interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think a more recent example of that, and I'm no fan of electric vehicles personally. Bit of a rev head for the petrol, but most recent example would be charging stations, right? You buy an electric car, what's the point? There's nowhere to charge it, right? So now all of a sudden you're seeing in a lot of car parks and other areas, and even new homes that are getting built, well, they come standard with these electric charging ports. So, it's all to do with the infrastructure, but the technology always goes first. Infrastructure follows last. So I think we're at that turning point where I think we're going to start seeing a lot more infrastructure to accommodate the technology, like what you just said. and it's pretty exciting, to be honest.
Yeah, it is. We're at a moment in history, folks, that it's exciting to be part of this. Before we get to the community questions, one of the other kind of set questions I had as we prepped for this interview was more of like a what's next for Blubird, and how can people start using the platform and getting involved? What do you have to say to that?
Yeah, okay. So look, if you're a founder looking to deploy assets, or an asset manager, or wanting to deploy a token, anything like that, I would recommend going onto our website, which is getblubird.com, which I'm sure will be at the end of this video as well. And just reach out via the contact form. That's probably the easiest way. And we'll reach out and book a demo with whoever it might be, run you through the software. If it's something that is the right fit for you, fantastic. We'll move forward on that front. If you're an investor just wanting to pre-create your account on the investor portal, check it out maybe. Again, head on over to the website, go to our products page or the tab, and from there you should see a link on where to open up the application itself and just create your account. It's free to create. No restrictions on that front, and you can check it out.
Mate, that sounds really interesting, and I'm sure there's going to be people clicking on that now because they're in one of those camps and looking forward to it. Now, getting to some of the community questions that there's a few that are in this chat, so we'll see how we go from the different channels. But some that we've seen, coming up even before this, was around the topic of the amount of assets tokenized across the issuers on the platform, Carbonhood, Arch Veritas, and those others. Can you shed some more light for that, please?
Yeah, definitely. So there's roughly between Arx Veritas and Carbonhood, there's around $60 billion worth tokenized total at this stage. With Arx Veritas having, I believe it's around another 30 billion in a draft state. So what I mean by a draft state is that they've entered all of the details of said asset, but they just haven't hit the deploy button on pushing those on chain. So there's a lot, an awful lot on that side. And it's only going to start getting more and more as we start working with more partners, and also as our existing partners start to push more of that on chain as well, as they start to get more and more confident with the platform and the solution.
Man, that's really interesting. I work with a lot of these tools. Like I use various sorts of AI builders, and when you say deploy button, that I literally have for some of the things that I've created for, like I've done ETF stuff, I've done stuff for OzDeFi. There is a big deploy button in another color. So I'm just picturing someone just about to, they're ready. They just need to hit that. So whoever you are, come on.
Funny you should say that, because it is almost that comical. It's obviously looks good in the application, but it is a deploy button. So they go through the process of loading the asset up, and if they're not ready to do that, it saves it in the draft state. When they're ready, they can just hit deploy. So the reason why it's built like that, just for those who are curious, is it's built for teams. So you can have let's just say a business manager or someone who might be not quite maybe C-suite. They have the task of entering in said assets. That's their job, right? But they don't have the authority to put that on chain. So that is obviously falls to someone who might be higher up, maybe a COO or a CEO or someone else. And then that's their job to look at, double check the asset, make sure it is all correct, and then hit that deploy button and push that on chain essentially. And then either from that point it gets published to the marketplace, or kept out of the marketplace if it's going to be like a direct sale to another company outside of that system. So very much a big deploy button indeed.
I can imagine two things. Like, one is someone should create like a kaleidoscope image of all the different apps that have a deploy button out there, because it's the literal or the figurative big red button that you hear about in movies, but also the fact that there is this person that we talk about in sales, like chief decision maker, and we'll talk more about the sales process as we have these shows. But I reckon that there's a chief deploy button presser out there, like that you asked, like, who's your chief deploy button presser? We'll see.
Yeah.
But let's get to another one, which was around the challenge of issuers needing to settle in fiat, and how that for getting TVL on places like DeFi Llama, a place that a lot of people look to. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely. So before I jump to that, just a quick joke from the previous statements. I think deployment officer would be an apt title.
Yeah,
You
CDO.
might start seeing that on the resume. Oh yeah, I was a deployment officer for XYZ. I handled billions in assets. So sorry, I just had to.
No, absolutely.
Had to throw that in there. But yeah, look, the challenges are, look, a lot of these large institutions, they don't all deal in stablecoins yet. They still operate on a fiat basis. So while they're wanting to purchase said assets that are on chain, they still settle it in fiat. So the issues there, a few things, right? First and foremost, we can't track said transactions on chain. We can track when an asset gets sent to another wallet, and we can assume, and by we, I mean the people who are outside of our platform, they can, and watching wallets, I should say, they can assume that, oh, there's been a transaction that's conducted, but they can't actually see how much it was for or anything like that. They can just see, oh, some assets went from A to B. So that's one of the main issues, for showing TVL on DeFi Llama, for example, is that because a lot of these transactions are not on chain, that's one of their prerequisites, is showing that on chain transaction from payment through to asset moving. So, and we are looking to solve that. It is one of those work in progress things. We've got a few processes in place that might alleviate those issues, that have a standing stable coin that sits in between a fiat transaction. There's a bit of juggling that happens from that standpoint, but it's just a way to represent what is already happening in fiat on the blockchain at that point. The important thing is the asset is on chain, and that is the thing that's being moved. So it's not that big institutions are against stablecoins. It's just that they don't have millions or tens of millions of dollars in stables just sitting around for these big transactions. To put it into perspective, some of these transactions are $100 million. Like, that's a medium to small transaction for these guys. They're not going to just have that in stables, because they're in fiat earning interest, or doing other things. So until there's more infrastructure on that side, we're not going to see a huge adoption overnight for that. So in the interim, we have to kind of solution that for these other reporting dashboards and things like that.
Yeah, it's really interesting that there's a lot that we can do with the new tech if the roads were paved, going back to that analogy, but figuratively, these roads are not fully paved yet. So we have to make do with what we've got, but we are pushing forward and really, getting people to change the ways that they're doing things. On that note, I mean, I think it's a really good one to highlight what you said there around the measurement, like with DeFi Llama and how they look at things, because there was this talk about how the different RWA platforms, and we'll get to this in the news, but they measure things in different ways. .io versus .xyz look at things in different ways, and people go, well, why isn't it like listed on here, or why are these guys bigger? They look at things in different ways. So it's important to really understand the nuance that's there, and I think you really shed a light on that. But do you have any news or upcoming kind of tidbits that you can share on that sort of stuff?
Yeah, definitely. So I might have actually mentioned it previously in our conversation as well, but we are working with RWA.io to start showing the assets that we've tokenized so far. That's a roughly 1 to 2 week type timeline that we have on that currently. There's just a bunch of APIs that we've got to build out and make sure that it's pushing the correct data and things like that. So that's the first step. And you did touch on a very, prudent point, and that is that all of these platforms measure things differently. So we are working with a lot of these platforms, and I know Redbelly is as well, to try and standardize what this actually looks like. Because at the end of the day, traditional real-world asset tokenization is not DeFi, and it never will be. That's a fact, right? These are centralized assets that are being brought on chain, and they're being brought on chain for the purpose of quite usually cross-border transactions, and other things along those lines that are just opening up new pathways to selling said things. They're not necessarily being tokenized for the purpose of yield farming or things like that. That is very much a traditional Web3 viewpoint. And so we're working with a lot of these dashboards to, recognize that tokenization isn't always DeFi. It's the act of bringing an asset to a digital state that is a legally represented asset on chain, and showcasing. Maybe it's not a total value locked, but it might be a total value minted or a total value that's transacted, things like that. Those are the sorts of metrics, and there's all the acronyms under the sun that we could probably use. But these are the sorts of things that we're going to start to see. Is the TVL is in my opinion very limiting when it comes to the true scope and size of showcasing what's actually on chain, because it's not actually a true representation.
There definitely needs to be more of a push to around this education, because I think just the very initial kind of broad-based view is what's the TVL, or if you're coming from a traditional finance space, you look at a fund, you go, what are the funds under management, or for ETFs and other sort of tradable instruments. So it's really interesting because there are these different ways to measure and ascertain that there's value. And this is not a trust us, bro. This is we can verify it. It's on chain. It's got all of that kind of stuff. And it's really interesting because, to your point there, it's like you can say something to around the statement of DeFi. All DeFi uses tokenization, but not all tokenization means that it has to be DeFi, because there's other things as you mentioned there. But what do you have to say? Because people ask things, in the community about oh great, this is on there. How do I get it? It's DeFi. Can I stake? Can I do this? How do I get yield? What do you tell people about that when you invariably get asked these questions?
Yeah, definitely. Well, look, the first thing, first and foremost, it's up to the asset issuer, what their plans are for said assets. We simply provide them a tool, much the same as Redbelly is providing a tool, being the layer one. We provide them the path and the tools to actually put said assets on chain, right? It's up to them and their goals, their business goals, their personal goals to do with those assets as they see fit. We're never going to dictate what they do. However, what we will do, and what we're looking to do in the future, is offer these asset issuers pre-built tool sets that give them more options. So let's just say, I don't know, it's they wanted to do some kind of staking and APY yielding type scenario. So we would have a tool set for them. They can then set an amount of assets. They hit, again, a big deploy button, right? Deploy those assets into that platform. People can then purchase and stake it against it, and earn some kind of yield, right? So we're giving them the tools. Much like, as a business user, you might use Microsoft Word and might use Excel, different purposes, but it's still a business practice. It's still a business use. So just a different area of the business. So what we're going to do is open up different areas for them to operate in their business, and allow them to start doing that. Now, that might be through partnerships. It might be through some of our own tools that we build up ourselves as well, or a healthy blend of both. So that's probably what I would speak to at the moment. But just keep in mind that this space is still very young when it comes to the asset tokenization space. So don't expect everyone who's in TradFi to be just running in guns blazing. They want to assess it first.
I think that's a very important lesson that because we are aiming at the market, it's not like a little part of the market, it is the market, and they are definitely much more cautious. But I think by showing evidence of the good things that are being built and being done here, this is the way that we chip away, and this is a benefit that you'll bring to Redbelly, but also blockchain in general, so others can take note from this. So I think, whether it's being a passionate founder and building stuff that solves problems for what you've been going through like day to day, and just providing more compelling evidence for blockchain and why. And you mentioned something before on craving trust through transparency. I think it's really great that you are building this and doing it with Redbelly. We'll have to get you back on the show, but we'll have to wrap up here. Is there any kind of final words that you wanted to mention to folks that are watching, the hundreds that are online that I can see?
No, just I hope you've enjoyed what you've heard so far. And look, if you'd like to learn more about what we're doing, feel free to reach out via the websites, or I'm sure you can find my other various socials on LinkedIn or Telegram and whatnot. So more than happy to connect and chat with anybody. I'm very passionate about the space, so I generally I don't shut up about it, to be honest. So more than happy to gas bag to anybody, mate.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for spending the last hour with me. We look forward to checking out the replay. Things are out there already, and people do please check out the links. This has just gone live. There's amazing stuff there. Corey, thank you for your time.
No worries. Thank you very much. And it was great meeting and chatting with you today.
Cheers.
Cheers.